Welcome. I am your host, Cindy Watson, and today I am so looking forward to introducing you to Robert Hanna. And we're going to be talking about recruiting in law and lessons learned that can help you practice with purpose. And welcome, Robert. It is so great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Cindy. I'm a massive fan of your show. I'm a massive fan of what you are doing for the legal community. So really honored to be here. Thank you so much.
Oh, and you are always so gracious. I was lucky enough to meet Robert through Clubhouse, and I have consistently been impressed with him. For those who don't know a little bit about Robert, he's based in the UK. He's the founder and managing director of KC Partners, and it is a really innovative, it's a leading global legal talent solutions and content creation firm, but it's got a very innovative approach. It's not your typical recruiting firm, to say the least. And he has built and scaled multi-million-pound revenue generating teams. But he goes that step further. He's a strategic advisor. He's an investor to recruitment and legal tech startups. And in 2021, he was ranked as a LinkedIn top 100 rising star influencer. And that does not surprise me at all. And he is also a regular speaker and host of his own very successful podcast called Legally Speaking Podcast. And it sits in the top 2.5% of podcasts globally. So very impressive roster, and kudos to you for that, Robert.
Oh, well, thank you for your lovely, kind introduction. It really means a lot. But you mentioned you were impressed by myself. I was very impressed with you, Cindy, in terms of our connection on Clubhouse and what you're doing through your clubs and the rooms that you're hosting and the content you're creating. So I'm just really pleased that we connected.
Oh, I'm so pleased to be connecting as well. And I think you're going to have so much value for our listeners and our viewers here today. But I'd love to start because I know there's some family legacy in law for you. So tell us a bit about yourself, who you are, and what made you specialize in legal talent in particular.
Yeah, and thank you, Cindy. So you've obviously very kindly mentioned my sort of to the present day, but just a very plotted history. I grew up in the middle part of the UK in Leicestershire, which is branded the Midlands. I grew up around there. I went up to university or college in the north of the UK, which was Leeds University. And then I moved to London to start my recruiting career. But I guess what stemmed my legal passion, or for jumping to do something connected to law, my grandfather ran a very successful law firm in the United Kingdom. He founded that in the 1950s, which
Wow.
Leicester, a lot of people weren't familiar. A lot of people from overseas have heard of London, obviously, but Leicester was the second largest and profitable city outside of London during that time. So there was a lot of British homemade manufacturing, cosmetics, the hosiery trade. And so there's a lot of business to be had. And so he set up a very successful law firm. So prior to going off to university and studying, I would go to his law firm for work experience and just to get a summer job, so I would do the really important jobs, Cindy, that are needed in law firms, like getting the coffee, doing the stapling, doing the photocopying, doing the shredding, doing the stamping, all of those things that make law firms, or historically made law firms, tick. So I always knew at some point in life I would love to keep so my grandfather's called Peter Henry Frederick Carr, hence the KC Partners. He's the C side of that. I always knew I wanted to have some way of keeping the family name connected to what he'd built so far and did so well, and supported our family through the legal space. So once I felt that I'd built up enough of my own expertise from my recruiting journey of starting in a FTSE 250 in the city of London and then moved to a boutique, I scaled and exited that. I set up my own company in 2016, but none of that was in legal, none of my previous recruitment experience. All I had was the technical skills. I didn't have any of the recruitment contacts or I guess knowledge to the level I do today. But I always knew I wanted to do something I had a passion about. And so that's where I combined my recruitment experience, jump into the legal sector, and then launch my business, because I wanted to carry the family name on and try and be as successful as my grandfather. And everyone says, well, how successful was he? And I say, I don't measure it on money. I don't measure it on anything like that. I measure it on every Christmas. As he got older and older and more retired, so out of the game, he would get even more Christmas cards from from his clients, from his first ever trainee. And that just told me what a wonderful person that looked after his people, but also he looked after his clients, and they haven't forgotten about him 20, 30 years post-retirement. And I thought, if I could leave that legacy and impact in this digital world that we live from community building, then I've done a pretty good job. I'm nowhere near there yet in terms of my own high standards, but that's how I benchmark success. So I know I've gone on a few tangents then, but that's a bit about me and where it came to the present day and what gets me out of bed every day.
Ah, I love that on so many levels. And I love that that's your benchmark for success. And I want to dig in on that a little bit more. But also, you talk about passion. And I love that you're known for being on a mission to disrupt the global recruitment industry, and that you really do bring, I think, you have this incredible capacity to combine that recruitment with that passion and purpose driven approach. And by the way, photocopying is a very important job in the legal industry, that's for sure. So I'd love you to
Absolutely.
tell us what you see as the future, as a disruptor. Like, what do you see as the future, Robert, for recruitment and retention of top talent in the legal industry going forward?
Yeah, and I guess just to sort of set the scene. So why I think we're a little bit different, and you very kindly mentioned in your introduction, I feel that the recruitment industry has always been a little bit broken. And what I mean by that, the relationships have really only got to transactional levels, in the sense where people would provide people to a employer or a law firm, and they would repeat, repeat, repeat. And that's fine. But that for me just felt so transactional, so linear. And so why we decided to embrace all of the other parts of our business through the content creation, the podcast you very kindly mentioned, the affiliations with the number of legal societies, and educating the next generation of educating and protecting, shall we say, the next generation of legal talent, was because we wanted to build community, and we wanted to build that know, like, and trust factor, and be known as thought leaders. And if you provide good enough content and you look after people from the start of their career, they'll remember you right the way through to the end. And remember, I said I wanted to be benchmarked on the number of Christmas cards or digital cards. If we start with that kind of ethos of looking after people right at the start of their journey, and we throughout continuously deliver, we can't possibly just be with them as a one-time person just through a transaction of when I need a job, because we're growing, they're in the community, we're engaging, we're sharing insights. And so that was really why we did what we did. And I guess that's where I think we're very different, and where I felt that we could be disruptive, because we were the first ever legal recruitment firm to ever launch podcasts way back when. Obviously now podcasts are everywhere. I still believe I'm the only legal recruiter in social audio, for example. There is not another legal recruiter on the platform such as Clubhouse. So I always like to be an early adopter and try, test. I'm a big believer in fail, and continuously learn. That's just the entrepreneurial nature in me. So in terms of being disrupted, you have to fail, you have to go first on things, you have to figure things out. And so whatever, and just this week I've been connecting with some good friends of ours that we have in the legal community, like Mitch Jackson, who you'll know. We've been talking about the metaverse and how we can take our businesses there and give VR and AR related experiences to our clients and to our audiences. So I'm always trying to look at ways that we can be first and disrupt the market and provide the next level of service or offering, and that's why I'm really keen on standing out and being different, and it's all linked to community.
Oh, I love it. And I think you're being very humble when you just say you're an early adopter. I think you are forging the path often, right? You are cutting the path for people to come. And I love that you talked about fail, because I think so often and as lawyers in particular, there is such a fear of that failure. And really, it's only through so-called failures that we grow. Like, I'm a big advocate of having fail-abrations, right? Celebrate our failures, recognizing here's what I can learn from it and how can I use this to catapult me forward. So that's such a great insight. And when we talk about the future, go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off there.
No, you go for it. I was going to say, I just love that fail-abrasions. I've never heard that before. I'm going to get your written confirmation to be able to steal that.
I stole it from somebody. So you are all good on that. I think it's a great reminder. And I love families that sit down and talk about, and I wish I could go back, because I came to that epiphany later, but boy, if I had it to do over again with our kids, they're in their early 20s now. And I know you're expecting, so this is something you can think about, Robert, is sit down at your dinner table all the time, whether it's a daily thing or at the very least once a week, and say, what's something you really spectacularly failed at this week and what did you learn? So you start adopting an attitude about failure that's positive, that sees this as something to celebrate. I think it's such a great approach. So
I love that.
So I'd love, when we talk about you disrupting and sort of what's, what do you see in the future? Well, I'd love your insights on what impact you think COVID, or more importantly, the so-called Great Resignation we're hearing a lot about now. What impact do you think that's going to have on the legal industry going forward? What do employers need to be doing, frankly, and what does that mean for lawyers generally going forward?
So I think sometimes the Great Resignation is a little bit misunderstood. I think what we're seeing now is just an expedited of what was always going to happen anyway, in my view, in the sense of we were always going to move to more traditional hybrid, remote, virtual working operations, or more common, shall we say, virtual, hybrid, remote working operations, where historically, particularly over in the UK within law firms, it was 5 days a week, pretty inflexible
Yeah,
in terms of, if you need that extra day, it's quite tough to give you that. Whereas now, and even to the present day, all of the job specs and qualifications we're getting when we're taking instructions, hybrid, remote, available, like they are on the job spec. It's part of the agenda. So I think definitely firms that are embracing flexibility, agile working, and really looking to work with people, and
yeah,
they're the ones that are going to do super, super well. So yes, the Great Resignation is real. We have seen a titanic amount of churn. People have left law firms and have left opportunities. There's a number of reasons for that. I think obviously certain people have maybe felt let down, or not protected or cared for during what's been a very, very tough time. And, I talk a lot about the importance of well-being.
yeah,
Can't just be put on a website and chucked up around core values. There has to be something substantive
yeah.
around that really ensures that the people within the law firms are protected and they feel safe, and there's safe spaces to do that. I think it's super, super important. So yeah, I just think the Great Resignation has speeded up to where we're going to be, and it's a case that the employers haven't kind of braced or prepared for where we are in terms of the speed of transition. And now there's a shift in terms of, right, how can law firms adapt to more virtual models? How can what are they going to do with their real estate that's sat 30% occupied and 70% unoccupied? Is that a good from a commercial perspective? And what can they do in terms of offering better solutions to their clients? Can they be more accessible? How can they reduce or make their fees more competitive and fit for purpose with the rise of virtual law firms and dispersed law firms, who are obviously making real headway in terms of being able to offer more competitive rates? So I think it's a super interesting time. I think there's a lot of things happening in the legal space. And the other thing I would say, I read an article about by 2030, 70% of the jobs haven't even been created yet. So as an agency, we don't know what are some of the jobs that are going to exist in the legal sector. If you think about it, take a step back, that makes a lot of sense, because the traditional qualifying as a traditional lawyer over here in the UK, and then going on to you do 4 trade seats, you would then qualify into a particular area of lawyer, be it employment, corporate, what have you.
Yeah.
The overall mechanics of that job is going to change. So obviously legal tech and parts of that. So there's going to be various legal engineers, there's going to be various legal tech components, and what that looks like at the makeup of the roles and the roles we're recruiting on, we don't fully know yet. And I find that fascinating.
Yeah. Wow, so much there. I'd love to unpack some of that. That's, as usual, you're always just delivering so much content. Now, when you talk about not even knowing what the jobs are going to be, as you were speaking to that, it made me think that, like, even new niches within the law, there are going to be new niches that develop that will raise a requirement for new kinds of lawyers in these practice areas. What do you see being there? I mean, obviously tech is a huge one. 100 years
Yes.
ago, that wasn't even an area of law to practice. So where do you see as some of these emerging markets possibly?
Well, I definitely think, particularly within the niches of like regulatory tax, I'm already speaking to a lot of, I had a meeting today with a corporate tax lawyer that was saying, he's got some quite interesting clients now, particularly when they're looking to do things from a cryptocurrency perspective, and, what are some of the mechanics and some of the laws and what that could potentially mean from them from a tax advantage or tax perspective, some of the regulatory points within that and some of the regulatory bodies. So I definitely see niches within those types of environments. And then also just broadly in terms of corporate law. You think about the number of new startup companies that are going to be so different, the mechanics and where they're built and where they're just, it's not going to be a traditional company set up. There's going to be companies set up in the lights of the metaverse in these virtual environments. So, the whole kind of corporate law space. Then you look at the intellectual property piece when it comes to the metaverse in itself. And that's a worry about, well, what about some of the jurisdictional requirements? And what about data protection? And what about some of the privacy concerns? So there's going to be so much that's going to come out of this that's, ultimately, and then you've got the flip side, there's always going to be disputes work. There's always going to be, there's always going to be some disputes when new niches arrive or new things happen or people are going through transactions. There's always going to be fallouts or arguments or disputes, and so there's going to be intricacies in the dispute sector. So practices. So I'm really interested to see what happens. It's going to be an exciting time, and you're absolutely right. Niches within niches.
Yeah. Well, and exciting that you raise as well, or pretty perceptive about the regulatory aspects, because I mean, you and I were chatting just before we started recording here today about, with COVID and mandatory vaccines and that creating this whole new area. And as we're seeing more like the future, the expectation is we're likely, sadly, going to be facing more, unanticipated viruses that are out there, and how do we manage that? So I could see a whole body of law developing. I mean, much of my practice right now is being taken up with, that finding that balance between the public safety protection versus the erosion of individual rights and freedoms. And as we see, whether it's viruses or healthcare, that's going to be changing profoundly as technology changes and we're exposed to different things. So that's great. And you mentioned fees as well. I wanted to unpack that a bit, Robert, because what are you seeing as the trends? Because I think one of the things that seems to be so stressful for lawyers and causes people to leave in droves is this docketing practice, right? This fees, these 0.1 sort of 6-minute increments of having to account for your time. What are you seeing, if anything, as the trends or expect going forward? Because I know, is it an area that you find that lawyers do find troubling still, that you're seeing a shift away from that?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a day when I speak to lawyers or certain associates that are not just do not like time recording. I think that's probably their biggest pain. So that's an absolute. What do I see in terms of models or things becoming more common that are not so common at the moment? I genuinely think subscription-based modeling for legal services is going to become more of the norm. I think that will become, because we're moving to a general subscription information-based ed tech world generally. You look at most things that you have services to right now, they're on a subscription typically. So why can't legal services be on more affordable subscription platforms that enable people to get greater access, but also can be modeled in the way that actually law firms get more recurring revenue, and it's a good model. So I see subscription modeling coming in more to law firms. I think naturally most clients are trying to push for fixed fees. That's still definitely fixed fees are still going to be around, and I think ultimately it just comes down to whether we could talk about for hours about the whole billable hour and whether it should stay, whether it should go, whether we'll live in a world that won't have one. But I think the subscription modeling is probably going to be the biggest advancement. And I've seen certain firms already do it and do it very, very well. And it can be broken down into subparts as well, because some particularly startups or mid corporates, they just need something off the shelf, or they need something. So why would they want to pay, $500 for that hour just for that consultation, where they could probably, for $50 a month, for $600 for the year, could get off the shelf. And if they needed any upside, there could be additional services. I see that being very competitive and very innovative, and law firms that switch to that type of modeling, and it gives them more guaranteed return revenue, I think could be quite interesting.
Yeah, that is an interesting perspective. And it's funny because that's coming up on Clubhouse a lot, where we seem to be finding those more progressive sort of cutting edge lawyers as well, I think, are showing up there and having discussions about this, which is great. And one of the things that struck me in unpacking still your fabulous answer about sort of COVID and the Great Resignation and the impact we can see, I think a lot of people have been shaken to their core and are reevaluating how they show up and how they live their life and are looking for a little more purpose. And I'd love your insights on that vis-a-vis the practice of law. Are you seeing that as an issue, that people are looking for more purpose? And what are some ways to be able to help find a more purpose-driven approach to the practice?
Yeah, so true. I think gone are the days that money will make people move. You know, historically, you know, there's always the expression money talks, and you know, if people offer you enough of an incentive, you will move jobs. And over here in the UK, there is a large trend of US law firms coming into London and offering eye-watering salaries, almost double what the traditional Magic Circle UK would do, in the hope that they would acquire UK talent. So somebody who would be, say, a fourth-year associate in London, a UK firm, could conceivably get almost double their salary in a US firm. But even still, that's not enough to tempt lawyers across, which, you know, some people say, well, surely it is. Some people do, but the majority, like you say, are looking for more. Okay, so what am I going to be doing? What is the culture like there?
Yeah.
You know, what is my life going to look like outside of work? Will I be able to have my weekends?
Yeah.
Will I have to, you know, will I have to be on call when I'm on holiday? Will I be able to attend my sister's wedding? You know, it can be as extreme as that when you're working on some of these heavy transactional deals, and, you know, it's relentless. So people are really thinking about what's important to them. What more do they want in terms of just not their work, but their overall life, and how it fits in for them. And I think they're looking for firms that are putting people before profits. So people that are investing, as I mentioned earlier, in well-being programs, people that are investing in, you know, making sure that there's a culture of safe spaces when people, if they are having a bad mental health day, it's okay. They can feel supported, or they've got people appropriately trained who can support them through that. Because you and I both know, Cindy, the level of people leaving the law at those sort of junior to mid levels is too high, and it's not a good sign, because I always said people who join the law should want to progress to the top of the tree and become partners, owners of their own firms. But if you ask a lot of the sort of junior mid levels right now, they're not as interested in terms of really becoming partners in firms. And what's more interesting to me is, if you speak to, I was speaking to a lawyer today who's at Latham and Watkins over here in the UK, super entrepreneurial. She's a third-year associate in a project development finance team, and she was saying, my salary is this, but I also have 6 other forms of income, the income streams that come through her real estate business, through her investing business. And I thought, you know, that's a really entrepreneurial thinking lawyer, because she also has her own side business. She has an organization which helps people in terms of careers, wellness. And I thought that is the kind of next level of lawyer that I see, that is allowed to have that creativity, run and do other things as well as practice the two. And firms that embrace that, they're going to keep their talent.
Yeah, I think that's so great. It's funny as you're describing that. I'm like, that sounds like me. It's fun because I've got my law practice for over 30 years now, and I'm still doing that. We've got real estate interests that we've got on the go, and obviously I've started Women on Purpose, and now Practicing with Purpose for the very reasons that you just said, Robert. So passionate about letting people get away from that competitive kind of traditional soul-sucking approach to the law, where even when you win your case, people come out feeling like they've been, you know, that had a starring role with Russell Crowe in The Gladiator, for heaven's sake. So, I mean, and I really love that. I know you're really passionate about normalizing the conversation when it comes to mental health, and you've touched on well-being here. So let's talk a bit about the elephant in the room, because you're right. People are leaving the practice of law in droves, and women are leaving at double the rate of men right now. So I don't doubt you've had some real firsthand experience about the sad state of mental health in the legal profession traditionally. So I'd love your insights on that. Sort of, what are some of the root causes from the traditional practice, and what are you seeing that we can do about it?
Yeah, I think burnout is a big one, right? I think people are getting burnt out. You know, the hours that they are being asked to do time and time again is non-sustainable. You know, you can't continuously just wake up at 5 a.m. having finished at 3 a.m. 5, 6, 7 days a week. It's not what people train for, what we're studying for in law school, you know. So I think that definitely is one of the common factors, burnout. The other is actually development, training and development. You know, I've seen a lot of lawyers that have told me they've had their reviews or appraisals, and partners have come in and it's not even been the partner that they're expecting. It's been a 5-10 minute conversation, and it really just felt like they were ticking the box rather than really caring about investing and developing them, and how they can get them more technically involved, how they can help them with their business development skills, how they can actually become a senior associate, how they could be on track to make partner, all of those things that are important to them. So I think definitely that training and development. And also firms that take very seriously diversity, equity, and inclusion. You know, people want to be in, you know, particularly if you're joining an international law firm, you don't want an echo chamber. You don't necessarily want to be around all of the same people. You want to be learning from people from different environments, different nationalities, different backgrounds, embracing inclusivity. And so, you know, firms that are sticking to the old school, we've always done it this way, we always hire this type of people. People don't want that. They want to be part of firms that are progressive, that really are a part of inclusivity, and you know, valued. That's the final point I'd say. Genuinely feel valued. Sometimes it amazes me how people forget how much of the power you can pay someone $500,000 a year, but you could say thank you to them and genuinely mean it, and send a really one-liner note before their weekend. And that will mean the world to them more than the paycheck. And sometimes just some basic management principles of how to value and show that you genuinely care about your people. That's what's going to make you hold on to your people.
Such a great answer. And I think you've really hit at the heart of so much of it. That when you think most lawyers, historically, it was a profession people took great pride in, and there was such a humanity that was brought to the practice. And somewhere along the line, it became so much about the money that we sort of lost the humanity to practice. And now I think those firms that keep sticking to the old practice are going to go the way of the dodo bird. And you need to be finding that, dig in to find that better culture, to have that human experience within the firms again. And I'd love if you would share with us, because you talked a little bit about the marker when you spoke about your grandfather so beautifully with the Christmas cards. I love that. But I'd love your insight. Like, how do you define success, Robert? And what's something you attribute your success to?
I honestly think success is happiness inside and out. I think I wake up now, I've, you know, and you've been very kind and said some beautifully complimentary things about me and what I've achieved. But, you know, this year has probably been one of the hardest entrepreneurial journeys and business journeys for a number of different reasons. But I've come through all of those and some tough deals, some tough negotiations, where now I wake up every day and I can genuinely say I'm happy. And you know what? There is nothing more than peace of mind, because I think if you cannot have peace of mind, you've always got some form of course, you're always going to have bad days, bum day. We're humans, but I think being genuinely happy, so you're happy at home and you're happy at work, that for me is like the ultimate defining of success. And of course, you know, we want to make some money along the way and have financial security and be able to give back. But I think for me, if I genuinely feel happy in myself, that is the definition of success. As simple as perhaps cliche as it is, that is my honest answer.
There is nothing cliche about being happy. I think that's at the heart of everything. And I'd love, how much do you think our happiness depends in part on living on purpose, like doing what you love and loving what you do and finding a way to be more purpose driven? What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. And that's why I love what you do, Cindy. I think it's everything. It's absolutely everything. Because, you know, it amazes me how many people I speak to now. Why are you a lawyer? Oh, my parents were a lawyer, and, you know, I thought I'd just become a lawyer, and, you know, it's the thing that I did. So you didn't really kind of think, you kind of just followed the path, right? And now, like you said, people have had this epiphany. People have been sat at home. They've been locked up in houses, you know, over the last few lockdowns we had in the UK. They've really thought, you know, what is my purpose? What do I want to give? Steve Olsher, who's a famous podcaster, always says is, you know, what is your what? And I think that's really, really good. And I think, you know, if you really think about that, you know, what is it you do want to get out of your career? Or what is it that you are really passionate about? And, you know, ultimately, that is the only way you're truly going to be happy, if you're doing something that you really are purpose driven around. And I always say, you know, passion is for you, purpose is for others. So follow your passion and your purpose will affect and impact others.
That's nice. Say that again. Passion is for you, purpose is for others.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. I haven't heard that before. That's great. And just digging in on that. So what do you think? And I know you've touched on some already, but what are some of the biggest obstacles that are facing lawyers in finding that purpose, that better way to practice?
Well, I don't think there's enough firms out there at the moment that exist that genuinely practice those principles of what you and I have discussed, Cindy. I think they still need to evolve. I think they need to be created. I think they will be created because there's just mass demand for it. And I think ultimately it's a shortage of those particular opportunities. And then it's also the waiting time for the existing firms so they can remodel, shape, reorganize, redesign so that they do become more fit for purpose. So I think they're the main challenges at the moment, because lawyers that are still being staffed out on heavy transactions or big disputes work, and they're working around the hours, and they don't feel that there's support, and they're worried that they're being judged at every term. And I speak to so many lawyers that are so underconfident. It's like, oh, I'm not sure if I look at them and I speak to them, I was like, you're a fabulous lawyer. It's just no one's told you so.
Yes.
And I can't tell you the amount of just, really empowering when people have done good, what that can do for somebody's confidence. So I always want to see more confident lawyers out there, not ones that are scared because of the culture where if they make one typo, that they're a rubbish lawyer, and that's not the case.
Yeah. I'm so glad you touched on confidence, because I think it's one of those off limit subjects, because everybody assumes lawyers have such confidence, and lawyers, I think so many have imposter syndrome, but show up faking it for so long, and they are so profoundly lacking in confidence, because the firm, they're all over you if you do something wrong, but they don't take the time to give that positive feedback. So I love that you spoke to that issue, so that for all of our listeners and viewers out there, if you have those moments when you're feeling not confident, think of everything that you've achieved in this world, and own your own value, and also recognize that you're not alone if you have those doubts. Sometimes it's part of the nature of the industry.
And I know something else you and I are passionate about, Cindy, as well, as having mentors, and how good that can be. Because also I encourage lots of lawyers to have mentors, because if you're only getting that voice within your internal walls, within your organization, then why not have that vetted? Why not have somebody that's, got a proven track record that can maybe say to you, do you know what, actually, you are doing pretty good. Or, you know what, maybe there are some development spots, but here's some constructive ways, or this is what I would have done. So, don't feel that you could just have to be limited to what you're hearing within that particular environment. Get out there, meet other people, have other people in your network that you can learn from, who can also be positive. Because if you surround yourself by more positive, uplifting people, I can tell you it'll be one of the best things you can do for your career.
Such great advice, Robert. I love that. And I want to make sure you get to talk a little bit about content creation as well. So what would be, because I know that's something you guys do as part of your service. Yeah. So again, for anybody out there, for all of you in the legal community, make sure to be checking out Robert's company as well. They offer the full range of services, including content creation, which as lawyers we often forget. So I'd love to hear some of your top tips about content creation for lawyers, and how it can help them maybe enhance their practice experience so they can practice with more passion and purpose.
Yeah, and look, lawyers get very concerned when they hear content creation, and perhaps a little bit overwhelmed. It can be really quite simple. So what I always say to people, when you're thinking about creating content, think about your topic of influence. So what I mean by that is, people are going to be coming to you because they have a pain. They have a pain, and you're the solution. So let's just say you are a expert lawyer so let's say you're a startup, you're a corporate startup lawyer. You help startups with them. It's quite easy, conceivable for you to think that some of the startup problems are going to be, how do they get some of their shareholders agreements together? How do they actually get some financial capital raise documents together? How do they ensure that they've got all their policies to make sure they're compliant as a startup? How do they register their company? Some of the basic things that, startup founders are going to be putting into Google. So you want to go on a platform such as answerthepublic.com or Keyword Planner, and they do all the work for you. You type in your topic of influence, so what you're wishing to be known for, and that's going to tell you what everyone is putting into Google, and then you can curate your content for them. So you could then create what's known as a lead magnet. So let's say 5 top legal tips for startup founders, what you need to know. Bam, 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 bang. So, register like this, do this, give them the top, and then get in touch for more information. Okay, so you can do some very simple things like that. And you can do that in video form if you feel comfortable in video. You could do that in an infographic form if you don't want to be on video. You could do that in an article form if you prefer to write. You could do what I've called the WAV approach, so written, audio, video. You have 3 different options in terms of the way you can produce your different forms of content. But just think about what is the topic of influence, because if you can niche down, you're going to build community very, very well. And the other thing I would say is, do not think you have to be the perfect lawyer. Everything has to be perfect with your content. People want human. So just shooting a video off your phone is completely acceptable. put it out there, because people want to know who is the real person behind that content. So just some immediate tips, but yes, I think obviously starting podcasts is one of the best things you can do. And we do a lot of consultation about how we can help people scale, grow, and monetize podcasts. I think anything you do from a content creation is just replacing some of maybe the old school ways you approach business development. Just getting a decent mailing list together and actually marketing that mailing list in creative different ways, rather than maybe some old article writings that's, you can still do articles and newsletters, but the amount of times you'd work on that and actually the low return on your investment, and think about other things you can do, from creating events. Now it's acceptable to host virtual events. Years ago, firms used to spend millions, literally millions of years on events, getting people together, flying people over from all over the world, schmoozing clients, all of that. You can create some really cool content about virtual events and create the buzz for fairly low cost and bring community. And then you can drive them off and get them into various different funnels and newsletters and community channels and things like that. So there's lots of things you can do, but I always say, be human, think about your topic of influence, and be consistent.
Yeah, such great advice. And again, everything that you talk about, your entire philosophy always comes back to that purpose and passion at its core.
Yeah.
Because when you build community, you're going to be able to, you're going to show up with more purpose, right? You're going to have more passion, and you're going to bring more purpose value to your constituents, to your prospective clients. I just love that. And the humanity. I am so glad again you talked about that elephant in the room. We think we have to be stodgy, perfect, impeccable, sort of in how we speak, and people don't like that anymore. It actually almost is a bit of a repelling factor. People want somebody who they can relate to, who brings that human approach, and who they know they can be themselves around as well. So such great advice. I love that.
And those that are comfortable with being authentic, and why be a copy when you're original, is always what I say to people. You just be yourself. But if the way to do good content creation as well is storytelling. So if you could articulate how you failed, celebrations, let's bring it back to that. If you can actually share some of maybe how you failed an exam and you thought you were down and out, but then put a success bit, or what you would educate, what I would have done differently, but show that you've never been a 100 out of 100 student, and then you've transitioned to law and you've won absolutely every case and you're the #1 rising star, why I missed out on this case, or how I've got setbacks, or actually when I've been struggling with my mental health, and storytell, but then also provide value or something that people could take as a learn from that. Your content's going to get really, really far, because people can relate to you.
Oh my gosh, I had a huge bright light that just went off with that. That is great advice. I tell you, and I hope this is the kind of episode for all our listeners out there. You are going to want to re-listen to this, because you may not realize there have been just absolute mic drop, gold nuggets dropping from the ceiling moments here. So, and it's funny when you talked about things that we learn from. What are some things that you know now that you wish that most lawyers could know when they first start practicing, Robert?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that making mistakes is okay is really important, because nice. I speak to so many junior lawyers that are in environments where they're so scared to express themselves, or they're so scared now, even more so because we have moved where not necessarily some of the junior lawyers, they might still be working from home because of the current conditions. And so that learning by osmosis and being able to overhear partners on a client call, maybe being able to pop into the office next door and ask about how would you draft that, or could you give that a quick once over? There's a real worry that junior people don't want to be bothering people remotely to pick up the phone and call. But I want to encourage people, you will make mistakes, and mistakes are absolutely fine. I think if you make the same mistake 10 times, maybe we'll have an issue. But, if you make a mistake and learn from it, and actually just put them to one side, then do you know what? You can be invincible, because my grandfather always said to me, a person who never made a mistake never existed. And it's so true. So do not let mistakes hold you back from being, you can be a brilliant lawyer and still make tons of mistakes along the way. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
Oh, so great. And I can't believe how fast the time has gone here. And I thank you for being able to give so much content so efficiently for us. And I normally end by asking, what's one of the greatest mindset shifts you've ever had in your life? Not necessarily even professionally. You've given us a ton of mindset shifts already, so I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you have any other that you can think of that are mindset shifts that have made a difference for you that you would share, that'd be great.
I'm not sure it's a mindset shift, but there's a quote that really landed with me. We're from Billie Jean, the famous tennis player, which is pressure is a privilege. And I
Mm,
think if you think about that, we get so stressed and worked up about our own, but the reality is we've probably done something good to get into that pressure environment. If you're now a senior partner at a law firm and you're under stress, and you've done well to become a senior partner, that the pressure is a privilege. If you've got clients screaming down your neck, you've acquired some clients, you've done something to do that. So I think sometimes we have to respect that, we've done a lot to get to the current pressure environment we're in. So
yeah.
let's say pressure is a privilege and look at it that way rather than seeing it as a negative. Look at it as a positive, and actually every problem has got to be a solution. So always look at things optimistically. But that would be my biggest mindset shift. When I feel like days are getting heavy, I think I've got my own business. I've been around 5.5 years. Like, I've done all this, I've done all that. Like, this is a privilege that this client is X, Y, and Z. So try and shift the mindset from this is a bad to actually this is a good thing and I will get through it.
I think that's fantastic because it's all about perspective, right? I mean, we can
Yeah.
look at you had 10 people look at the same thing, and depending on how you look at it, it can make a profound difference. And being able to really recognize that the gifts in those, so those things that maybe you're seeing as oh, this is such an adversity, being able
Yeah.
to recognize the opportunity and gift in it. That's beautiful advice. Well, Robert, this has been fantastic. I can't thank you enough. So glad for all of the value that you've brought here today and shared. And again, for all of you lawyers out there who are listening, I really invite you to listen to this and then listen to it again with a different perspective and squeeze all the juice out of this episode that you can get. So thanks so much for coming, Robert.
Thank you so much, Cindy. You're a wonderful podcast host. You're a wonderful community builder, and it's been an absolute blast. So I'm genuinely honored to be part of your show. And thank you so, so much once again. Really appreciate you.
Oh, and likewise. And for everybody out there, please do make sure to learn, go check actively to seek out more about Robert Hanna. I'll make sure to include all the details in the show notes for you. You can check him out on Clubhouse. If you're on that platform, search for him by name, Rob Hanna, LinkedIn as Robert Hanna, and we'll definitely post all of his various contact points in our show notes. And also be sure to check out his podcast, Legally Speaking Podcast. And if you have any recruiting needs, absolutely make sure to go check him out, because as you have probably gathered from this episode, you will get more than your value that you bargained for. And I'm sure you all got loads of value from this episode. So if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, and also make sure to share it with anyone that you think could get some benefit. So for all your friends in the legal community out there, share this episode most certainly, and also just let them know about the podcast so they can get some value on how to find a better way to practice. And with that, that is a wrap for this episode. So until next time, go forth and find ways that you can practice on purpose, and find a better way to practice law so that you can rekindle your passion and make a difference in the world. Because let's face it, that's why most of us start the practice of law. So go negotiate your best life on your terms. Until next time.